Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So the name of today's video is Imagine if the Black child was taught about Black Egypt, Cleopatra, instead of the Negroes on the whipping post, says Nina Silva of the Black Money Movement. So I came across this video a few days ago and wanted to discuss it. It's a short clip of a well-known Black Brazilian entrepreneur named Nina Silva. Silva is one of the founders of an organization and movement called Movimento Black Money. I'm quite sure you can figure out what that means. It means Black Money Movement that promotes Black entrepreneurialism and the idea that Black Brazilians need to not only start Black businesses, but also have to support Black business and circulate Black money, hence the name Movimento Black Money. I appreciate both Silva and her partner, Alan Sawadis, as they encourage Black Brazilians to think, buy Black, marry Black, have Black families, and educate themselves on finances. So this is Nina Silva right here. She appeared on a talk show by a popular B-list actor and singer-musician, Sergio Larosa, I think his name. I just discovered his podcast recently, and so I wanted to discuss her appearance on the program because of it was just a short section of the video that I wanted to talk about. So in a recent interview, Silva says something that applies to all of us, our children, the education system, and the necessity of telling our own story. Brazil and the United States, as well as other countries that have Black populations, should definitely check the message. It's a message that's been shared by our Black historians for a number of years. In Silva's words, you will hear echoes of historian John Henrik Clarke, who argued that as long as we continue to tell Black history starting from the slavery era, we will never reach our full potential as a people. I can relate to this message. I've told this story before, but it always applies. I still remember being introduced to the 1977 miniseries Roots and thinking to myself, is that how we got here? A good friend of mine once shared his own memory of dealing with the absence of Black people in school history textbooks. He shared a memory of his going to a Detroit Catholic school and one day having a white substitute teacher. One day he had a white substitute teacher. When he asked the teacher if there were any Black people in history, or did he know anything about Black people in history, the teacher smugly replied, you guys were slaves. And that was about it. And any child, particularly any Black child who's gone through the education system, if this is something that perhaps you won't notice, but if it's something that you do notice, you would be perplexed. Like, how come when we learn about American history or world history, or in the case of Brazilian history, how come we don't ever come across material about, Black people? It's a similar question that Black Brazilians or anybody else in the diaspora can relate to. We see the same complaints from Black Brazilians. Brazil has played its own role in whitewashing history and presenting Black people in positions of subservience in highly stereotypical manners. In my first 10 to 15 years visiting Brazil, I noted how Afro-Brazilians were nearly invisible when it came to biographies about Black Brazilians, and they were perhaps just as invisible as authors. When I would go to some of the bookstores, in Sao Paulo and Rio and Salvador, like all of these Black people I see walking around in this country, like, how come I don't see these faces on the cover of books, book covers? I don't see them as topics in, biographies. It's just a question, when I would go into popular bookstores in Brazil, if you had books written by or about Black people, they were usually foreigners. You go into a Brazilian bookstore, and if you saw Black faces, books about Black people, they would usually be about Black Americans, and the book would be translated into Portuguese from English. But in recent years, with the emergence of a new generation of Afro-Brazilian authors, books focusing on Afro-Brazilians as subjects and works of fiction focusing on the Black experience, this is something that I've seen in recent years. I want to say in the last 5 to 10 years or so. And that's definitely a good thing, definitely an improvement. But as the saying goes, there is still a long ways to go. Now, before I get into what Nina Silva talked about, let me just go through a couple of some of the things that I've talked about on the blog in recent years that kind of it kind of speaks on what the topic is today. This article from 2021, my ancestors produced knowledge and my history doesn't start with slavery. Who is the scientist goddess that is promoting Black science? I forget where this woman is from, and she might be from Bahia, but she's one of a number of Black Brazilians who, coming up through the university system, they're trying to change the path and the manner in which Black people are presented. Again, if you want to change the narrative about how Black people are presented, then you have to get in front of it and tell the story yourself. So this is, I don't know if she's on Instagram. I'm gonna have to find out if she's on Instagram, but she's one of a number of professors and activists who have taken it upon themselves to start teaching, Black history and the history of Blacks in the sciences, for example, in her own way. Like, if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? This is a story from, I believe, the editor of the Mundo Negro website, one of Black Brazil's top media outlets. The worst moment of school was when they talked about slavery. I felt humiliated. The embarrassment of Black children in classes about slavery and abolition. So this story is from Silvia Nascimento. I think she's the founder and the editor of the Mundo Negro website. She recalls, let me just talk about what she wrote, because I'm sure there's plenty of Black children who can relate to this. She says, all eyes on me, and I didn't know where to look. The teacher talked about negros escravos, meaning Black slaves, the whip, deaths, separated families, until a white princess named Isabel signed the Lei Áurea, the Golden Law, and liberated my ancestors on May 13th, 1888. Now, I've talked about this recently in the struggle for changing the narrative of how abolition happened in Brazil, instead of just giving all the credit to a white princess who just signed a piece of paper with a few words on it saying, slavery is officially abolished in Brazil. They don't tell the history of the Black struggle, the Black resistance, the quilombos, the runaway maroon societies, the Black abolitionists in Brazil. They don't talk about this. So kids, slavery will come up in school, and this is a woman talking about her experience in Brazil, but it easily applies to any child in the United States. Like, where's my history? Why are Black people presented this way? Why is it that it seems like anytime Black people are going to come up, it's going to be a small section about slavery? In the United States, they'll talk about the civil rights movement or something like that. And this is just her recollection of how she was feeling, when the question of slavery came up in a classroom in Brazil. And she's looking at Princess Isabel as a white savior, like all of my dolls. And she's saying, very rare. Definitely, she's talking about the era in which she grew up. It was rare to find Black dolls for, Black children. I did a report some years ago, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the article says something like less than 3%, like 2.7% of the dolls in Brazil were white dolls. I don't remember exactly. It might be 2.7%, but I think it was definitely maybe under 8% or something like that. I got to find the article. And I, the only Black girl in the room, was the depiction of this tragedy, the embodiment of a people who only suffered according to my teachers. Some looks were pitiful, others intimidated me, but they all made me feel uncomfortable. The period from slavery to abolition was the only mention of the Black population in most of my school life during the 1980s and 90s. What's it like being Black if everything I learned in school about my ancestors was tied to the greatest terrorist act of humanity, which was escravidão negra, meaning Black slavery, which lasted longer than the majority of wars? So this is what Silvia Nascimento remembers growing up. I don't know where she's from. She might be from Sao Paulo, but this is what she's talking about growing up in the, and going to the education system in Brazil. If this is what I just said, if you're Black and you're in a school and you're learning history, all you're going to learn is probably about slavery. Like, where is the history of Africans and African descendants before the slavery era? The same thing she's saying. Fortunately, in recent years, like I pointed out with the other lady who's, she's taken the lead on teaching, African oriented, history and participation of Blacks in the sciences. This article is from 2017. The legacy of African peoples, Afro-Brazilians push for the redemption of African history and the recognition of African contributions through or to humanity. Now, while I was living in Sao Paulo, I came across a few brothers who were, studying, taking their masters in history. And they were using their knowledge and the research that they had done to change the narrative, to speak about the history of Black people in technology and the sciences, right? This brother right here, what's his name? Carlos Eduardo Machado. He's adapted a more African-centered name as of late, and I don't remember what he calls himself today. But this is what he said. He wrote a book, first of all, Genios da Humanidade, Ciência, Tecnologia e Inovação Africana e Afrodescendente, meaning the geniuses of humanity, African and Afro-descendant science, technology, and innovation. And he says, African cities had 1 million inhabitants before the arrival of the white man there. A very sophisticated form of cesarean was done, much more hygienic than in Europe at the same time in the second half of the 19th century. So he's talking about the cesarean section, saying that this was very sophisticated and it was a better technique than what they were doing at Europe at that same time. The white European population has created the imaginary that everything that exists from sophisticated to developed was created by Europeans. So Black people, after they attain these educations, they start changing the narrative. Like, okay, look, we've been presented as slaves for how long now? Let's tell the other side of the coin that goes much further back than slavery. Okay. The representation of Black people in school textbooks and the kinds of stereotypes taught to the readers of these works. This is an article from 2018, and it kind of talks about the same thing. How are Black people taught, or how are Black people presented to children in the education system? And what I've seen in Brazil is kind of the same thing that's going on in the United States. This is something that I mentioned recently, that in recent years, there's been a rise of Black authors and Black names in books released in Brazil. This is an article from 2021. Even with the challenges of Black authors publishing books in Brazil, Afro-Brazilian literature is gradually gaining more space in bookstores. That's something that I've definitely noticed. It's a good thing. But then Brazil and its role in whitewashing history. TV series, this is from the Rede Record, the record TV network in Brazil. The TV series completely whitens ancient Egypt. Cast features 40 actors, all of whom were white. So this is a story. This is an article, I think it's from 2014, and is written by Shadow Nunes. It says, a Black Egypt bothers many people. And these images are from the Rede Record, the record TV network TV series José do Egito, meaning Jose from Egypt, or Joseph from Egypt. And these, just take a look at some of these actors. How is it that you present a television series about ancient Egypt? It seems that, people don't acknowledge the idea that Egypt is actually in Africa. And you go back thousands of years, you have reports of jet Black Africans. The Greeks knew about this because they wrote about this. Okay. But this is what I'm just saying, the role of Brazil. We already know about, from Hollywood, how they've whitened Egypt. They use white actors and everything to present, the ancient Egyptians. But Brazil is playing its own role in doing that. I've seen there's been a number of series that present historical characters as, well, some of these are going to be fictional characters, but the whole cast is usually presented by white actors. Brazilians are increasingly questioning, why is this? This is called o embranquecimento histórico do Egito Antigo, the historic whitening of ancient Egypt. That's what the title of this article is. So more and more, you see here, somebody here, whoever wrote this article is talking about Chic Anta Diop. Some people say Diop, some people say Diop. But, in this famous debate that was, I don't know, about 50 years ago, Chic Anta Diop absolutely demolished some of the greatest white Egyptologists of the time. And he basically proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that ancient Egyptians had very dark skin. I'm not going to get into this right now because the debate is ongoing. But why is it that people have a problem with, believing that Egypt, which is located in Africa, could have had Black inhabitants, could have been Black people behind all of some of these technological advances that happened thousands of years ago? Just whether you believe it or not, it's just the idea that blows me away, that people can't even fathom the possibility. Turning white. Why do they whiten Blacks in movies, soap operas, advertisements, and in history? This is something that we see happen in Brazil all the time. You take the Iemanjá the sea goddess in in ancient Yoruba mythology. In Brazil, they'll whitewash this god that's from Africa. Again, the image they want us to see of ancient Egyptians. The Dona Flor is a very famous book from Brazil, written by the famed author George Amado. And in the book, she's described as having darker skin. But you put it in a TV series or in a theater program, and the actresses are going to be represented by white women. This is a famous what's the thing? Chiquinha Gonzaga, very famous piano player in Brazil, and she was known to been. Some people call her black. Some people define her as mixed race. But on TV, in a series about her, she's presented as a white woman. She's portrayed by a white actress. Why is it that Brazil is joining in the process of whitening historical and even mythical figures that were known not to have been white? The role of blacks on Brazilian television, the continuation of secondary roles, stereotypes, and invisibility, it just doesn't stop. This is changing as of late, but just not fast enough. And this is something that Black people are going to have to understand. In order to change the narrative, we have to create our own. This is from 2018, Tela Preta, meaning black screen TV for everyone, but thought up by us. Young Black actors, producers, directors collaborate on new online television network. So again, you want to change the narrative, you have to do it yourself, or else we're going to continue to get racist stereotypes that Brazilian novellas need to stop using. This is a piece from 2017, The Continuous Invisibility and Devaluation of the Black Population, just a series of tried and true stereotypes that you find of Black Brazilians on Brazilian television, right? So what's the message here? This is a recent article on the Mundo Negro website. It says, don't wait for the whites. Don't wait for white people. Everything that we have was achieved, which is the whole point here. If we want to change the narrative, we have to do it. The sign here says negro é gente, like Black people are people, right? So let me get back into the original article. This leads me to Nina Silva, who introduced at the top of this video a clip shared by the Luiz Gama Institute IG page. Okay. So this is Nina Silva that I'm talking about today. The Instituto Luiz Gama shared this video of Nina. And it says in their post about her clip, it says, in an appearance on the La Rosa talk show, Sergio La Rosa, the podcast on music and Black culture by Sergio La Rosa. Again, he's like a B-list actor. Most people know him by face. He's been around for at least 20 years, in Brazilian film, television series, or whatever. He's also a talented musician. So he hosted an interview with the CEO of the Black Money Movement, Nina Silva. She spoke about, among other topics, the importance of the Black population having their historical achievements recognized and known, especially in children's education. So this is what she said.
Mas essa questão histórica da gente estar aqui 400 anos que sejam.
But this historical issue of us being here for 400 years is a matter of our previous history not being discussed. Because if they say that Egypt is Black, that those pyramids have everything calculated mathematically, that Cleopatra was Black, imagine this child at school studying, seeing, having these examples. But no, there's just what? A picture by Pierre Verger with a Black guy with a whip on the tree trunk. Brazil has long depicted images of slavery. They constantly have these novellas that are called novelas da época, that is, like throwback novellas that are set in the slavery era. So these three pictures, these three stills are from a popular Brazilian novella called Escrava Isaura, means the slave Isaura, right? The name of the slave was Isaura. And this is one of the most popular images of Black people being whipped in Brazilian society during the slavery era. You see a Black guy whipping a Black slave. If any of you are familiar with the Pelourinho area in Salvador, Bahia, the term Pelourinho actually means whipping post, which is what this guy is tied to right here. And you see it's all from the same novella because it's the same, looks like it's the same guy that's administering the lashes to the backs of these three black Brazilian slaves. Okay. Why is it that Brazil is so comfortable with always presenting black people as inferior, subservient, or as slaves? Too many novellas to mention from the past on Brazil's television networks that presents black people as slaves. So the changing of any situation starts with that first step, the change of the mindset, a will to succeed and a desire to make it happen. And whether we're talking about Black Americans, Black Brazilians, or any other group of Blacks in the world, the change that we seek depends on us because ain't nobody else going to do it for us. So anyway, that's a short clip that I just wanted to share because, Black Brazilians are talking about this as well. How long are we going to continue to see ourselves portrayed in a certain way, ignoring our thousands, tens of thousands of years of history before we were enslaved and brought to the West? So anyway, this is what Nina Silva had to say. Curious to know what you thought about this. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Consider liking, give me a like for this video, share this video. So consider subscribing to this channel if you've seen more than a few videos that you thought were interesting. Click on the notification bell so you'll be one of the first people to see my videos when I post them. If you like this video, definitely consider, either, giving me a super thanks or maybe just contributing, whatever you feel is necessary, what you think this video deserves to my Cash App at Mr. Marcus72. That's $MrMarques72 at Cash App. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and ask you all to come back and check out the next video that I post.